Thank you for agreeing to do the Our Voices Matter project.
Thanks for asking me.
Oh, you're very welcome. It is September 7th, 2010. And before we get started, how are you feeling today?
I feel great today. I feel really good today. It's been a funny weekend, but I feel good.
It's not that long since the storm, the big hurricane happened. You feeling pretty good during that?
Yeah, no real anxiety or anything like that. I was expecting worse than what it was. For the most part, it was pretty calm in my area. Mm-hmm. Not a whole lot of damage or anything. A couple of neighbors had some trees down, but that's all.
You're here because you have lived experience with mental illness and you'd like to tell your story.
Yes.
And every story has a beginning, a middle, and a continuous end that goes on and on.
Yes.
And your story is pretty inspiring. And I wonder if we might not start with where it all began, where you were born and what date. And
I was born on September 26th, 1959 in Middleton, Nova Scotia. My mother was from Newfoundland. My father was from Nova Scotia. My father was married at the time that I was conceived, and I wasn't conceived by his wife. I was conceived by a woman that he was seeing. I was under the impression in later years that she was under the impression that he was going to stay with her. That didn't happen. She was working as a housekeeper for another gentleman, and he really didn't want me in his house. So they were going to put me up for adoption, or my mother was. And my birth father and his wife couldn't have children. So he brought me home to her. And she raised me as if I was her child. And she did a hell of a job. She was a good woman. I loved her a lot. But right from the beginning, my father used to tell me to tell the other kids that yes, I was adopted, but because it was never hidden from me. I think probably the hardest part of that was the social workers coming to the house and asking me if I was all right and if I was being treated good and fed and clothed, or was I being beat or abused. As a 3.5 or 4-year-old child, you shouldn't have to go through that. My biggest fear was what happens if I say the wrong thing? Will they take me away? I've already been given up once. You know, there's two schools of thought. Do you tell kids that they're adopted? Do you not tell them that they're adopted? I think you should, but I don't think you should at 3 or 4. I really don't. I think it's wrong.
Now, you live with anxiety and depression. Can you tell me a little bit about when you think that might have begun for you? It sounds like that may have been...
Well, I don't think I've ever known a day without anxiety. I never knew what it was. I was diagnosed when I was 5 with a duodenal ulcer. So they say that comes from stress and worry, that most ulcers are caused from that. So I guess that from a medical standpoint, probably my first diagnosis of anxiety would have been around the age of 5. And it never ever really went away. I think I spent my life trying to compensate for the fact that I was a little bit different, even though I looked the same as everybody, you know, and did everything the same way that they did. I was just a little different because I was adopted. And, you know, that wasn't a really big thing. I suppose it was, but a lot of families didn't talk about it. There's a lot of kids out there today probably still that don't know that they were adopted, but they were. So I think the anxiety probably started before I came to live with my parents. Just, I was in a household that was his, hers, and somebody else's. So, I got kind of tossed around like a hot potato. So I think there was always anxiety.
Tell me a little bit about how you spent your time in the home. Did you have friends? Did you enjoy school?
Growing up, I never really had a lot of close friends. I had friends, but like I said, I was always overcompensating. In my mind now, when I look back at it, I tried too hard. So I think that, I wanted people to like me, so I did things that I thought that they would like me to do, but that's not what they wanted me to do. So I don't really think I learned the proper way to interact with people until I was much, much, much older.
How did you feel about school itself?
I hated school. I didn't feel like I fit in. I always felt like an outsider. I think because of the anxiety and the mental issues that I didn't even know what they were, I struggled very hard with school. Like I said, I overcompensated. I tried to be something that I wasn't and tried to make kids like me, but no. If I could have bypassed school, I think I probably would have.
You lived in Saskatchewan for a time, and I know you spent about 10 years there. From what age?
When I was 16, I met my younger sister. And when I was 17 and I was finished high school, I had decided that I was going to move away from home. My first thought was to move to Ontario to be around my sister. But young love bit, and I followed a girl out to Saskatchewan that her father had got posted to Moose Jaw. And that was in 1977, and I was 17. And I stayed there from 1977 until 1987. I'd like to tell you a lot of what happened out there, but I really don't remember because I had been doing drugs since I was probably 10 or 11. I think I got caught stealing liquor when I was 8. My parents caught me stealing brandy to sleep. But from the time that I was 17 until I came back home in 1980, well, even after 1987, I was pretty much a booze and dope hound. If you could get it into your body, it pretty much went into mine.
At this time, or prior in your childhood, did you ever receive help with your anxiety or your depression? Did your parents take you to a doctor to talk about it, or when you were out west?
No, my parents never ever took me anywhere to talk about it. They never ever seen it as an issue. They just figured I was just a normal kid acting out. In Saskatchewan, I did see a doctor there. It started out that I was going to him because I was drinking so much and I wanted to know why and why I was mad. And basically, it turned out that he was a psychologist, and we started delving into my family history. And once he heard my story, he identified that there was mental issues going on, anxiety, depression. I don't know, probably a whole list of other things that I don't even know about. But him and I worked on it, and I was on, I believe at that time I was on Paxil or something like that, but I was still way too angry to get help. That didn't happen until I came back here.
And that was, you would have been 27.
Yeah. In 87, when I came home, I came home because my parents weren't well, particularly my dad. He had had a nervous breakdown a few years before, and just before I came home, my mother, and when I say my mother, anytime I refer to my mother, it will be the lady that raised me. Her name was Lucy. I don't call her Lucy, I call her Mom. But she also had a nervous breakdown. Her childhood had been a mess as well. But I never got any help until she passed away in 2005. My doctors tell me I'm what they call a stuffer. I put it all in the bag and I'll deal with it later. The problem is that there's no day named later, or someday. So in 2005, in April, end of April, beginning of May, my mother fell and broke her hip. And she would have been fine, but she had very bad kidneys. And she made it through the surgery fine, and a couple of days later her oxygen levels were still low, so they decided to give her a medicine called Lasix because she was building up fluid on her system, and they were hoping that that would help expel some of the fluid, but it actually had an opposite effect, and she had a massive heart attack and eventually succumbed to that. She was in her 80s, and I wasn't really surprised that she was going to pass away. We had been prepared for that on number of other occasions because of her kidneys, but the day that she died, or the day that we buried her, my 42-year-old sister-in-law died of cancer. I just couldn't take it anymore. I went to the basement of my house and I stayed there. Probably close to a year. At that time, I had my brother that I had just met from British Columbia move in with us, and to this day, I feel bad for the first impression. It wasn't a good one, but thank God he's seen past it. We're very close today, but
Wayne, it sounds like that was maybe a jumping off point for you to realize that you needed to do something more. Going back a little bit, when you mentioned that your brother moved into your house, who else shared the house with you, and how did you meet her?
oh my. The other person that shares my house is the most incredible woman in the world. Her name is Karen. She was the girl next door. She was 7 years older than I was, but I met her in 1972 when I moved to the West End, Halifax. And I hung around with her brother. Actually, still do. But she was involved with somebody else, and like I said, she was 7 years older than I was, so I didn't even really pay her much attention. But in 1987, when I came back home, things were different. Her and her husband were on the outs, and we were both older, and age didn't really make a whole lot of difference. 7 years didn't seem like a whole lot. And so in 1990 or 1991, and she'll be mad at me for not knowing which, it was in February night. Another buddy of mine and I were supposed to go downtown, and her brother called and asked us if we'd come over and have a drinking place in Pictionary. And my friend was in love with her. I didn't want anything to do with her. And they had a picnic table for a kitchen table, and she sat down beside me, and her leg and my leg touched, and I knew I didn't want to know, and I didn't want it to happen, but I knew I was going to marry her. And we went for a walk that night, and the snowflakes were 3 or 4 inches around. It was magical. And we've basically been together every day since then. And I wouldn't be here if I didn't have her.
Tell me about how you spent your years of work. And I do want to go back to the woman of your dreams, but just putting this in.
I've never been a person, I guess I always felt I was a little ADHD or something, because once I got onto a job and I understood what it was all about and I knew it, I kind of lost interest in it. I've never really settled into one job. I've been a brakeman on the railroad. I've been a laborer in a potash mine. I've been a laborer on the railroad. I've worked in bars. I've been an insurance agent. I've been a car salesman. I've been a mortgage broker. My work life has pretty much been here, there, and everywhere. I always felt bad about it. And nowadays, that's what everybody does. Now nobody stays in a job for 20 years. I always felt bad about that, and I've even had conversations with my psychologist about the fact that, I couldn't keep one job. But the restlessness in me just doesn't allow me to do that. I go so long with the job and then I get bored. But I don't think I ever really felt like I belonged anywhere, and I don't really think that any job ever touched me that I knew this is what I wanted to do. And funny as it seems is that when I got sick this time, when I came through it at the end of it, I know now what it is I'm supposed to do. I'll be 51 in a couple of weeks. And I know for the first time in my life that I want to work with people that have mental illness.
I know, Wayne, that you came into contact with an organization called Healthy Minds Cooperative. What caused you to go to Healthy Minds?
During therapy at the Cobequid Center in Saffron with my therapist, one of the things that I had mentioned to her as I was going through, starting to recover, was that it would be nice to be able to share my story with other people so that maybe I could circumvent some of their pain, or maybe let them know that they weren't the only ones that felt the way that they feel. And I said that I'd really like to. I had taken a Dale Carnegie course years earlier and never had a fear of public speaking, and had said to my therapist that I would like to do something that involved public speaking about my mental health issues. And she mentioned that there was a new co-op that had just opened up called the Healthy Minds Cooperative, and that they actually had a group called the Speakers Bureau. And that was the beginning of a big change in my life. I met a wonderful lady by the name of Cheryl Stevens, who was the facilitator, and took me in and embraced me and nurtured me and encouraged me and put me on the path to public speaking. After that, there was other opportunities that came along. Actually, today I'm the vice chairman of the board of directors. I'm on a couple of committees there. I'm also the facilitator now for the Speakers Bureau. And we have another group called Stand Up for Mental Health, which is comedy with people that live with mental illness, and we educate people through comedy and our lived experience with mental illness. And our lived experience with mental illness, we go around and we entertain people, and we get an opportunity to laugh about our illness, and Other people get a little bit of an insight as to what our illness is, and they get a laugh too. So, the Healthy Minds Cooperative, I kind of think I owe them my life. Between them and my therapist and my wife, it's what's kept me alive. Because there was a point where I knew how and I knew where. I just didn't know when. But I knew at some point that I was going to hang myself. Thank God today I don't feel that way.
Going back to the difficult subject, was there a family history that you are aware of mental illness? You did speak of your father having a nervous breakdown and your mother, as you knew her, having a nervous breakdown.
Yeah. My birth mother's family, yes, there's an enormous amount of mental illness there. They grew up in No Town, Newfoundland. Okay, they grew up on a little point of land. There was 15 or 16 or 18 kids or something, and I've since met pretty much all of my birth mother's children. She just passed away this July. I was in Newfoundland for that. But I have an older sister. She suffers from depression and anxiety, bad anxiety. I have the younger brother that I spoke about, Clifford, that lived, from BC. He suffers very badly from depression. He's actually very ill right at this moment. I'm concerned about him. On my father's side, my father had mental issues. There's other people that have them, but for the most part, the family's very closed mouth about it. Stigma is a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. And it's the one thing that I want to fight. Had I known, had we been an open family and had we talked about it, maybe it would have never got to where it got to with me. Maybe it would have been nipped when I was a kid. I mean, when you're 8 years old and you get caught stealing brandy out of the fridge, somebody needs to take you to a doctor. They need to find out why you need alcohol to sleep when you're 8 years old. That's not right. As Maya Angelou says, people do what they know what to do with. So, do I blame anybody? No. Do I think they did their job? It's not mine to decide. I'm doing mine.
Sounds like in 5 years you've taken what was a really, really, really difficult childhood and put it in perspective. And through good counseling, unfortunately, for a very sad reason, but something jump-started your altruism with regard to helping people with other mental illnesses. When did you reconnect with your birth mother?
I reconnected with my birth mother in the first time I spoke to her probably would have been 1985. My younger sister, who, like I had said, I had met when I was 16, her and I are only a year and a half apart. So her and I, she was the one originally, the only one that I knew about. I didn't know, I had heard rumors of the other siblings, but I didn't know about them. She also suffers from mental illness, and she really, really, really badly wanted to find our mother. She had questions that she needed to have answers, and I knew that my father knew somebody that could get a hold of our mother. So on Mother's Day in 1985, I called her. She was living in Fortune, Newfoundland, and I called her. And I called her first to see what the reception would be before I gave the number to my sister, because I didn't want my sister to be hurt. As it turned out, my sister was the first one to go and meet her, and that didn't work out very well. For whatever reason, my sister and my mother really didn't connect the way that they would have liked. And the following year I met her. So I met her in my wife was here, she can tell you. I think I met her around 1992 was the first time that I physically met her, somewhere in the 90s. And we got along famously. And I think my younger sister had a problem with that as well. I don't have the relationship with her that I'd like to. Basically, my younger brother is the one that I'm the closest to. My other sister that lives in Newfoundland, we're not distant, but we're not close. So, but yeah, so my younger sister, she was the catalyst that got me to get together with my mother. I don't know if we ever got to be mother and son, but we did get to be friends. And sometimes that's more than mothers and sons have. So I'm grateful that I got to know her. I'm thankful that I got to meet my family. And I'm ecstatic to finally feel like I fit someplace. I've seen cousins this year I look like. Mannerisms that I've been told are like this one or that one. And growing up, it was always the opposite. You didn't look like Uncle Bill. You didn't laugh like Aunt Mary. You know, you just didn't fit. And my mother passed away this summer, and the greatest gift she ever gave me was my family. The sad part, she's not here. But sometimes that's what we do. We give people gifts when they need them so that they can move forward. And I'll always be grateful for that.
It sounds like you've had a lot of things contribute to your recovery since that dark day 5 years ago.
Yeah. There's been a lot of bad things happen to me in my life. I mean, we haven't gone anywhere near the physical abuse that other children put upon me or some older kids did. I mean, you asked me earlier about school. One of the reasons I hated to go to school was because I knew I was going to get beat up every day, or going to have to fight not to get beat up. I've been sexually abused. I've been physically abused. I've been emotionally abused. I've just been abused. But I'm here. And I guess my will to live is stronger than my will to give up.
To be able to speak freely about that painful existence of living with more than one type of abuse. You've worked through a number of things. It looks like your anger is...
My anger is the last hurdle. My anger is the last purification that I need to purge. I'm going into therapy this week, actually, for 5 very, very in-depth sessions, and maybe more with my psychologist to get at the root and find out exactly what it is that I am mad about. You know, I guess watching this you can think I've got lots to be mad about, but I've dealt with most of this. We've put most of these babies to bed. Okay, but there's one there that's hiding. We don't know where he is yet, but I can promise you one thing. We're going to find him, and we're going to get rid of him. because if I've got another 30 or 40 years left to live, which I hope I do, it would be nice to live it pain-free. And a lot of this stuff is old now, and it's not mine, it doesn't belong to me. I've given it back to the people that it really belongs to. I carried their crap. My father laid it on me that he didn't want me to tell my mother. He told me when I was in my 20s that he was my birth father. But asked me not to say anything to my mother. And I carried that crap until my mother died, only to find out that she already knew. But that was one of the things that crushed me. That was one of the things that put me over the edge, is that I had fought so hard for so long to protect her. And she was on the other side of the field fighting, trying to protect me.
And this is your adoptive mother?
Yeah. Like I said, when I speak of my mother, it's my adoptive mother. If I'm speaking about my birth mother, it'll be my birth mother. She was the lady that had me. She wasn't the lady that raised me. And that may sound cruel and callous to people, and I'm sorry, but it's the truth. It takes a lot more than giving birth to be a mother. So she did what she had to do. I'm not blaming her. I wish things had been different, but they weren't. And at the end of the day, she was the lady that gave birth to me. Another lady was my mother. But I wish that the world would learn that secrets are poison. We need to talk to each other. We need to nurture each other. We need to love each other, but we need to stop hiding. This is all avoidable. There's no reason I spent 50 years being mentally ill. There's no logical reason for it. But I guess logic doesn't really play a whole lot of into it, you know. But
do you feel that it was stigma or a lack of awareness that prevented your family from the time you first exhibited symptoms, physical symptoms at the age of 5?
I think that it was lack of knowledge. I think that had I been growing up today in that atmosphere, I think that probably things would be a little different. Today there's help. In 1965, 1966, there wasn't a whole lot of psychologists you could go to. No, you could go to a psychiatrist and they'd lock you up in the mental institution for a little while, zap your brain, but there wasn't the knowledge there then today that there is today. Mind you, today we've still got a ways to go. And, you said it best, stigma. The number one reason today that people don't get help is stigma. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that's why I do it every opportunity that I get, is to erase that, because people are in pain that don't need to be in pain. There's help. But, how sad is it when people are more afraid to tell their friends and relatives that they have an illness than they are of the illness itself? That's just wrong. So that's why I go out and I scream it loud and proud. I've got a mental illness, look at me. I have a mental illness, but that's not who I am. That's only a little piece of me. There's a lot more to me than that. I've got dark hair. Well, it's almost gray now. But that doesn't define who I am. I've got a funny voice, but it doesn't define who I am. There's a whole lot that makes us up. And you know what? People have cancer. People have heart disease. People have diabetes. They don't hide. Why should we? Why should we have to hide? We shouldn't.
Wow. If and people will see this tape, I think they'll be truly inspired by a person who's traveled a pretty difficult road, still dealing with issues, but your firm belief that, as you say, mental illness is just a small part of who we are.
Yeah.
Tell me about the kinds of things that you do that keep you well.
The things that I do to keep me well, I suppose, are, I guess at the top of that list, it's being involved, being in the place where mental illness is, and trying to combat stigma. Um, Doing public presentations either for the police department or for the security staff at the hospital or for whatever group comes along. To doing things like I'm doing today, to doing the stand up for mental health, for helping other people learn how to public speak so that they can do it, or to learn comedy so that they can go out and carry on and do the same thing that I'm doing. I spend a lot of time camping. I have a motorhome. We spend a lot of time. That's actually the one of the prescriptions for my therapy from my therapist is to get out there and to get back into the world and to start to enjoy people and not be so uptight about what other people think, but to get out there and just to really live my life. And the other thing that makes me healthy is my wife. My wife makes me very healthy, and I'm very blessed. I have some incredible people in my life, and I've eliminated as much of the negative people as I possibly can. There's always going to be some negativity, and you're going to get negativity with the people that are close to you, but it's not poison. And it's not constant. So I've learned things. I eat better. I sleep better. I don't live in the bottom of a bottle anymore. I take each day as it comes. I look for the good in things and people instead of the bad. If we want to find negativity, all we have to do is look. The real trick is to find the good things in the bad. So basically, I spend a lot more energy now at being well and a lot less energy on the sick part. When it comes along, I acknowledge it, I recognize it for what it is, but I also tell it that you're not the end all and be all of my life. There's other things out there. I can see the daylight now, where before all I ever seen was darkness. So you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you wake up in the morning and you think, well, you know, I'm above ground, I'm still breathing, everything's still working. So let's hope that today is going to be a good day. And if it's not, you know, you deal with it. If it starts to get too much, you call your doctor up and say, something's going on, we need to talk. But being aware. The other thing is every time I talk to somebody, every time we do a presentation, every time we do a comedy show, every time I tell my story, I give a little bit out. I give a little piece of me away. But the piece I give away is not as healthy as the piece that people give me back. So I'm out there trying to collect pieces of happiness from other people.
As a closing few words, what advice would you give to people living with mental illness?
Get help. You're not alone. Okay? Find help. There's lots of really, really good organizations out there today. To hell with the stigma. To hell with anybody that's going to stigmatize you or categorize you. Just remember that 1 in 5 people will be affected by a mental illness, either directly or indirectly. 1 in 5 will be. That's larger than heart disease. That's larger than cancer. That's larger than diabetes. That's larger than them all. Okay? The only difference is that we're still in the closet. They're not. So come out. Get help. It's there. Just get help. I don't know what else to say.
That's good. No, that's good.
People need to get help.
Wayne, you've been doing some public speaking for a while now, and you mentioned a couple of really valuable places where people could use some education and personal experience from an individual who lives with mental illness. Can you tell me about an example of one of those times you were able to help someone?
Yeah, there's been a few. The one that comes to my mind right now is that I recently done a presentation for the security staff at the QE2 hospitals for the health sciences, and one of the things that I told them in my presentation is that we don't know what's coming. So if there's people that we need to talk to, if we have friends or relatives that we need to tell them something, now is the time to do it. And at the end of the presentation, one of the gentlemen came up to me and put his hand on me, and I could actually feel him shaking, and he said to me, "You have no idea what you did today, how you touched me." Apparently he had been in an abusive relationship when he was a child with his family, and being the oldest, he took the brunt of it, and in turn he passed that on to his younger siblings. And the comment that he made was that he was going to go home and call his siblings because he needed to tell them he was sorry. That was very touching to me. I've had other people come up to me. I had another gentleman in that same one that came up and said that he was going back to his doctor and demanding that he get in to see a therapist. I wish him luck, because there's a lot of people looking for therapists and we don't really have enough. For me, I do a lot of presentations for the city police department through the CIT, the Critical Intervention Team. One of the most rewarding things is when somebody comes up to you and says, "I get it," and "thank you," or "I have a brother that has schizophrenia," or "my sister is bipolar," or "my mother was bipolar." People are coming out of the shadows now where we need to be. We need to be in the light. We don't need to be in the dark anymore. We've always been society's, what's the word I'm looking for here? You know, society has always wanted to hide us away. The imbeciles, the crazies. We have an illness. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, "Oh, I think today I'm going to be schizophrenic," or "I'm going to, manifest bipolar illness," or "Oh, I think I'll just get depressed." Depression to most people is they're having a bad day. I wish. People say, "Oh, I go for a walk. Oh, I listen to my favorite music." We're ill. We're not stupid. If it was that easy, there'd be no psychologist, there'd be no psychiatrist, there wouldn't be any need. We could just go for a walk, listen to our favorite music. It's an illness. And we really need to come out of the shadows and stop being put there by society. Society needs to recognize that mental illness is here. It's not going away until we... Anybody that had a mental illness because of the stigma, if there was none, came forward, we'd be overwhelmed. But for me, every time I do a presentation, every time I do a comedy show, we educate. And if there's 100 people in the crowd and one gets it, my job's done. My job is done.
Wayne, you've talked a lot about fighting your own personal stigma and your keen desire to help other people deal with the stigma that they might experience in their own families, in the workplace, in society in general. What sort of thing would you say to those people about fighting the stigma in their lives?
I would say that it's time as a society that we were less afraid of what people thought of our illness and became more afraid of the illness itself. Again, I would say that, we shouldn't be hiding in a dark corner somewhere. We should be out. I don't think we should be any longer that we should be society's, embarrassment. 20 years ago, we would never say cancer. We'd always say the big C, or they've got the C, I'm not an embarrassment. I have nothing to be embarrassed about. I was born with a marker that gave me an illness. The way some of my friends have been born with markers that have given them diabetes, or breast cancer, or heart disease. They're not embarrassed. Why should I be embarrassed? I didn't do anything wrong. I think it's time as a society that we recognize that mental illness is a large part of our society, and it's only going to get larger with the stresses that people go through with work. Stress-related time off now is the largest thing that gets people out of work. What do they say? $54 billion the government is going to spend on mental health-related illnesses or absenteeisms from work. Why should I be an embarrassment? For me personally, every time I speak to somebody, every time I speak to a group and somebody gets it, my job's done. One person out of 100 gets it, my job's done.
You talked about the joy that it gives you to be able to help that one person. I think it's probably more than one, but that's
That's what like I said, I'm almost 51. I'll be 51 in 3 weeks. Okay? It's only now I'm discovering what it is that I was put here to do. And what I'm put here to do is to educate people about the stigma involved with mental illness, and to let them know that it doesn't have to be the end. It doesn't have to be the be-all. It's only a part of who you are. Get help. There's lots out there. Okay? We all deserve to walk with our heads high. Okay? We really do. And we all deserve to get the help that's out there. We need to demand it from our society that mental illness gets the same amount of funding dollars as other projects do and other illnesses do. But the big thing is that we need to stop being ashamed, because we didn't do anything to be ashamed. I know people say it's a catch-all, Oh, well, they're going to court and they're going to say they're mentally ill just so they get treated easy. Well, you know what? Think about it, people. Think about what some people do that end them up in court. Now, would a normal person do that? Do you think a person that's healthy, wealthy, and wise with their thoughts and their feelings is going to wake up and say, today I think I'll turn into a crack addict? Or I think I'll start taking methadone? Or methamphetamines? No. There's a reason. And that reason is mental illness.
But you're a strong example of what can happen to a person who begins to reclaim his mental health.
I'm the poster boy for what can happen when you take control of it and it doesn't take control of you. Is it a long and hard battle? Yes. Do I slip back into it sometimes? Yes. Will I? Yes. But I'm never going back where I was because there's no need. The help is available. I know now when I get sick what's coming. But the thing is that at the end of the day, I just have to do what I have to do, and that's educate people and try to eliminate the stigma.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. Anybody ever watch Survivor? Yeah. Well, before I came up here today, they told me I wasn't allowed to talk about sex, religion, politics, or bodily functions. So as Jeff Probst on Survivor would say, pack up your gear, head back to camp, because I got nothing for you. Now, my doctor tells me that my mental illness is caused by electrical receptors not finding their destinations in my brain. They're getting lost. I said, just by friggin' luck, they're all males. Won't stop and ask for directions. Now, I honestly and truly believe that there's a higher power looking over us. I also think they've taken some holidays or coffee breaks along the way. That's about the only way I can explain the 70s. Now, speaking about the 70s, back then I was pretty ill, so I was self-medicating, smoking a lot of weed, drinking a lot of booze. As a matter of fact, I smoked so much and I drank so much that you can pretty much recycle me today, turn me into a hemp shirt. Just don't put me near any open flame. I told my doctor, I said, when I die, I want to donate my body to science. And the doctor goes, yes. Perfect specimen of pickled and smoked. Now, the doctors have all kinds of terminology for how our progress is doing in our illness, okay? And one of their favorite ones is a thing called non-compliant. Okay, that's the medical jargon. The real jargon is oops, we gave him the wrong drugs. Now, I have a friend, very, very dear to my heart, and she has OCD. Everybody know what OCD is? Obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay? Like I said, she's really close to my heart, so I try to help her as much as I can with her illness. Usually about once a week I go over there and move her stuff around. Now my wife is right into this harmony, you know, and the flow and all of that stuff, so she hired this guy that does, you know, the feng shui, and asked him to come in and assess our house. And he basically told her the only way we're going to get peace and harmony in the house is if I move out. Now, back in the 70s when I was self-medicating, I thought it'd be a really good idea to get married. So I did. I married a girl. I was married for 11 months. It's the longest 10 years of my life. We got off to a really bad start. Now, this is a true story, okay? We got off to a really, really rocky start. How rocky? Well, she brought her boyfriend along on the honeymoon. I wouldn't have really had a problem with that, except the bugger wouldn't leave me alone. So my wife and I went to a wedding not too long ago, and they were serving hors d'oeuvres, not sit-down dinner. So this lady come by and she had a tray, and she said, I said, oh, they look good, what are those? She said, they're battered vegetables. I said to my wife, I wonder if they have their own support group. Now, speaking about my new wife is completely different from my other first wife. My wife now, I call her new, but I've been married for 18 years. She's a little bit different, and by that I mean a little scary different. She hates to shop. She never wants flowers, and she never wants a card. She says the flowers die, the cards are no good. You know, you just read them and pitch them. So, to make her happy, all I have to do is bring home a pound of Brussels sprouts. But have you ever tried to put them friggin' things in a vase? Now, actually, though, really and truly, to tell you the truth, my new wife, or I call her my new wife, but my wife now is my biggest fan and my biggest supporter. She couldn't be here today, but she did offer to supply the canned laughter for me. And I said, no, that's all right, honey. I'm really, really not comfortable being around your brother when he's drunk. So back when I was really, really sick, I used to sleep all day and dream that I was awake, and then I would sleep all night. Somewhere's in there, the psychosis got a hold of me, and I went shopping. Now, I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do with 5 pairs of stilettos and a big silk teddy. But my wife says I don't really look all that bad in them. So my doctor tells me that I need to relieve my stress, you know, do something to lessen the stress in my life. I said, what do you suggest, Doc? She says, yoga. Get on the mat and never get up. Anyhow, I decided I'd take her up on the offer, you know, so in yoga they teach you all these positions like the warrior and the downward facing dog, and my absolute favorite is guy drinking beer and watching TV. So I go to this yoga class, and the first night I show up there, it's me and 8 women. And the first thing that goes into my mind is they think you're a pervert. They really think you're a pervert. And I'm thinking, maybe I shouldn't have worn the stilettos and the penny. So okay, the instructor tells us to lay down on the floor and to grab our knees and to pull them up towards our stomachs. I said, oh boy. So then she says to rock to side to side. So while we're doing the rocking side to side, she informs us that these are called gas-producing exercises. Then she says, I want you to rock back and forth. I'm thinking, thanks a friggin' lot, Doc. Great stress reliever, farting in a room full of strange women. I mean, I don't want to tell you that I had gas, but 5 minutes later the hazmat team came in. 3 of them passed out. So there's there's a pregnant woman in the class with us, right? She's 8.5 months pregnant. She's doing these exercises like she's reading a book. I'm dying. Okay? I mean, I was so bad that by the time I finished the class, she'd already had the baby and started breastfeeding. So around that time, I was working in a call center. Okay? And they had all these rules. If you wanted to talk to your neighbor, you had to get permission. If you wanted to go to the bathroom, you had to put up your hand. And then they only gave you a couple of minutes and they wanted you back on the phone. Well, anyways, I did that for a couple of months, and then one day I got fed up, so I walked up to my supervisor and I said, "Hey, have I ever shown you my gas movement exercises?" After that, they said, "No problem, pal, you can take up to an hour and a half. You guys are great."